The flickering neon sign of the Crossroads Inn cast long, dancing shadows across the damp asphalt as I pulled into the parking lot. Another night shift, another chance to escape the crushing silence of my empty apartment. This place, with its perpetually dim lobby and the faint smell of dust and forgotten dreams, was hardly a step up from my last dead-end job, but it paid the bills. Tonight, the manager had been unusually specific. A large group was checking in, filling every one of our quaint, dusty rooms. Odd, considering we rarely had more than a handful of guests. At 10:30 p.m., the lobby remained eerily quiet. I was tidying the antique register when she arrived. A woman, ancient and frail, yet with eyes that held the sharp glint of polished obsidian. She wore a dark, heavy cloak that seemed to absorb the dim light around her. Her steps were silent on the worn rug as she approached the counter. "I'm here for the travelers," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. She pushed a small velvet pouch onto the counter. It clinked softly, hinting at coins within. "The whole group?" I asked, trying to sound professional despite the prickle of unease on my skin. I peered past her, but the night outside was a solid wall of darkness. "They prefer to arrive discreetly," she replied, a thin smile stretching her lips. "I've settled their accounts. Just the keys." I hesitated. Our policy was strict about individual check-ins, but there was something in her gaze that made me push the room keys across the counter without another word. As she gathered them, her eyes fixed on mine. "One more thing, child," she whispered, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "There are certain peculiarities of this place. You'd do well to heed them." She slid a folded piece of parchment towards me. "For your safety." Before I could react, she turned and disappeared down the hallway, her cloak billowing like smoke. I stared at the parchment, my heart thudding. It felt cold to the touch. I set it aside, intending to ignore it, probably some local eccentric's idea of a joke. But as I turned to restock the coffee bar, a soft, melodic tinkling filled the air. My head snapped up. The antique music box on the mantelpiece, usually locked away, was playing a haunting, childlike tune. My breath hitched. I knew I hadn't touched it. A cold dread washed over me. I remembered the parchment. With trembling hands, I picked it up. The script was elegant, almost calligraphic. "Instructions for the night keeper. If the music box in the lobby plays on its own, do not approach it. Its melody is a lure." My eyes darted to the music box. The tune was sweet, innocent, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. I forced myself to look away, focusing on the words on the page. 2. The old grandfather clock in the dining hall must always show the correct time. If it stops or shows a different hour, wind it immediately, but do not look at its face while winding. I glanced at the lobby clock. 11:45 p.m. 3. Should you hear children's laughter from the kitchen after 1 a.m., ignore it. Do not open the kitchen door. The laughter is not for you. 4. Do not serve anyone after 3 a.m., regardless of their request or appearance. 5. If a patron attempts to pay with anything other than currency, e.g., a tooth, a lock of hair, politely refuse and offer them a complimentary glass of water. Do not accept their offering. 6. The old radio in the back office must remain off. If it turns on, do not touch it. Its broadcasts are not meant for human ears. 7. Before dawn, ensure all windows are tightly latched. If a window is open, do not close it yourself. Simply report it to the manager in the morning. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't a joke. This was real. I looked at the music box again. It was still playing, the tune now seeming to echo in the cavernous lobby. I forced myself to turn my back on it, clutching the parchment like a lifeline. The music box finally fell silent just after midnight. The sudden quiet was almost worse. I paced behind the counter, my nerves frayed. Then a soft chime echoed from the dining hall. The grandfather clock. I knew it was supposed to chime on the hour. I glanced at the lobby clock. 12:05 a.m. The grandfather clock was wrong. My heart pounded. Rule 2. I crept towards the dining hall, the darkness pressing in around me. The massive clock stood in the center, its hands frozen at 11 o'clock. I reached for the winding key, my gaze fixed on the polished wood of its casing, carefully avoiding its face. My fingers fumbled with the key, cold sweat beading on my forehead. As I wound it, a faint metallic whisper seemed to emanate from within the clock, a voice murmuring indecipherable words. I squeezed my eyes shut, winding faster, desperate to finish. The chime rang out, a deep, resonant sound. I pulled my hand away, stumbling back, and forced myself to look at the lobby clock. 12:06 a.m. I had done it. The grandfather clock was now ticking steadily behind me. I returned to the lobby, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant tick of the grandfather clock. Then, just as the lobby clock turned to 1 a.m., I heard it. A faint, childish giggle from the direction of the kitchen. My blood ran cold. Rule 3. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands over my ears. The giggling grew louder, joined by another and another, until it sounded like a dozen children playing a macabre game. It wasn't joyful laughter. It was distorted, echoing, full of a chilling mirth. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to open the kitchen door, to see what was there, but I clung to the rule. "Ignore it," I whispered. "Ignore it." The laughter continued for what felt like an eternity, then abruptly ceased. The silence that followed was deafening. I slowly lowered my hands, my body trembling. I had made it through. At 2:30 a.m., a figure appeared at the front desk. It was a man, his face gaunt and pale, his eyes sunken. He wore clothes that seemed decades out of style. "A drink," he croaked, his voice dry as dust. "Just a small one." My mind raced. Rule 4, do not serve anyone after 3 a.m. It wasn't 3 yet, but something about him felt wrong. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, yellowed tooth. "I can pay," he whispered, holding it out. Rule 5. If a patron attempts to pay with anything other than currency, politely refuse and offer them a complimentary glass of water. Do not accept their offering. "I'm sorry, sir," I managed, my voice shaking. "We only accept currency, but I can get you a glass of water, on the house." He stared at me for a long moment, his sunken eyes seeming to bore into my soul. Then, with a sigh that sounded like rustling paper, he nodded. I quickly poured a glass of water, keeping my gaze fixed on his face, avoiding the tooth. He took the glass, his fingers brushing mine, and they felt unnaturally cold. He drank it in one gulp, then turned and vanished into the shadows of the hallway. The next hour was a blur of heightened anxiety. I paced, watching the clock, willing the minutes to pass. At 3:45 a.m., a crackle of static filled the air. My head snapped towards the back office. The old radio, which had been unplugged for years, was now emitting a low, guttural hum. Rule 6. If it turns on, do not touch it. I froze, staring at the office door. The hum grew louder, then a voice, distorted and garbled, began to speak. It wasn't English or any language I recognized. It sounded like 1,000 voices speaking at once, layered over each other, a cacophony of whispers and screams. It clawed at my sanity, an unbearable assault on my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands over my ears, but the sound seemed to penetrate my very bones. "This isn't real," I chanted. "This isn't real." I focused on the ticking of the lobby clock, trying to drown out the horrifying broadcast. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Slowly, agonizingly, the static faded, the voices receded, and the radio fell silent. I opened my eyes, gasping for air. The office door was still closed, but the air felt heavy, tainted. The clock ticked past 4 a.m. Only 2 more hours until dawn. I felt a desperate need to check the windows, to ensure they were all latched. Rule 7. I moved through the lobby, my eyes scanning each pane of glass. They were all tightly shut. I moved into the dining hall, checking those too. All secure. A small sigh of relief escaped me. But as I turned to leave the dining hall, my gaze fell upon the large bay window that overlooked the overgrown garden. It was wide open, a cold breeze rustling the curtains. My heart leaped into my throat. Rule 7. If a window is open, do not close it yourself. Simply report it to the manager in the morning. A figure stood just outside the window, shrouded in mist, its back to me. It was tall, slender, and seemed to be looking out into the darkness. I wanted to scream, to run, to slam the window shut, but the rule echoed in my mind. I forced myself to back away slowly, my eyes fixed on the figure. It didn't move, didn't turn. It just stood there, a silent sentinel in the pre-dawn gloom. I retreated to the lobby, my entire body trembling, and huddled behind the front desk, watching the clock. The minutes crawled by, each one a torment. The sky outside began to lighten, a faint gray bleeding into the black. At 5:50 a.m., the figure outside the window seemed to dissolve into the mist. I dared to breathe. 10 more minutes. I stared at the glass doors, willing the sun to rise. Finally, the clock struck 6 a.m. A soft, golden light flooded the lobby, dispelling the shadows. The oppressive weight lifted from my shoulders. I stood on shaky legs, taking a deep, shuddering breath. It was over. I had made it. I walked towards the glass doors, pushing them open to let in the cool morning air. The parking lot was bathed in the warm glow of the rising sun, birds chirping their morning song. It was like stepping into a different world. I glanced back at the now normal lobby, then grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The warmth of the sun on my face dispelled the chill of the night. I slid into my car, started the engine, and glanced back at the inn one last time. For a moment, I thought I saw a faint, distorted reflection in the bay window, a fleeting glimpse of something ancient and hungry. I blinked, and it was gone. I pulled out of the parking lot, a shaky laugh escaping my lips. I had made it through the night, but one thing was clear: I was never coming back to the Crossroads Inn.